All right, welcome back. Welcome back to session 6 of Passion Talks. This is the second to last session and one of the ones I've been very excited for. This is research and development work in the university and beyond. So all day today, we've been on like a tour of these stories of hope. We've been to different parts of the world and the country talking about how to share hope. We've taken a tour through online ministry and how to help people make every space they're in, every person or relationship feel more hospitable. And now we're going to zoom into a specific or a particular kind of space, the expert space. How are the people who are experts in all of the different ways that the world has changed in the last 18 months, making sense of all of that, and how are they navigating hope? So I'd love to introduce the session chairs. They're pulling double duty. Dr. Tammy Chang is a staff scientist at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, PhD from Stanford, and also the Passion Talks chair for the conference. And Dr. Cheryl Chen has studied and built AI for over a decade. She's part of Google Research, working on machine learning modules. She's part of the Google Christian Fellowship Steering Committee, and she is Passion Talks founder and one of the chairs on the committee. So I will hand it off to them for session 6.
Yeah, hey everybody, welcome to Passion Talk session 6. I'm excited to introduce to you the panel of speakers and know more about what this session is about. I have pasted in the description, but it is basically about the people and their high-level journeys and experiences pursuing the depths and complexities of truth and advancing our understanding, and also from their personal journeys as well. And if you go to the bit.ly/PT21ref, I pasted in the program at the bottom just for temporary during this session. And what you're going to see is that the world, as we know, is ever changing, and we all need to shift and adapt. And these understandings and discoveries become more and more important depending on context. And given the events of the past year, we've had so much change right out from under us. And I think it's not hard to argue that these are some of the most impacted areas. These are all very specific topics of which different people have different expertise. And luckily enough, we have people today, the 6 speakers today cover each of these sectors. And they're gonna have, this is gonna be unlike the other sessions where each person is gonna have everybody has kind of very deep dive into the specific area, but also they're gonna have a different a narrative arc that they're going to tell. Some will tell it from the high level, some will tell experiential, and some will talk about their personal journeys in their area and professions. So I won't introduce and give context for every single speaker, but you see them here and you can read it online, and we'll have amazing discussions after each. Without ado, I want to introduce my dear friend, Juanita, who is a medical doctor. So Juanita, why don't you present?
Thank you, Cheryl. Well, thank you all for having me here. It's been amazing to be invited to this journey. And my topic is called Research in Medicine as a Strategy from Heaven. I am pleased to be here. Thank you for the invitation. And I want to start with a brief description of how I understand medicine. I think it's a combination of science and art. The science that allows us to understand God and God's creation, in particular in medicine, allows us to understand his creation in the human body and how it works, and the art of caring for what I believe matters most to God, that are people. So with that, you may be wondering, how did I get into medical research? And I've spent the last 15 years training as a medical doctor, and the more I learn, the more I realize that there are more unanswered questions. There are a lot more things that we get to ask that we don't have a concrete answer for. And that, in combination with the actual desire to help people in an effective way, has drawn me and taken me into this journey of research in the particular field of immunology that is my medical specialty. So that my hope here is to foster understanding of what was created and how things can be improved, how things can be arranged in a way that we can allow people to live better and live longer and live a better quality of life. Now, the major statement of my talk today is that I really believe that research in medicine, and this is not only true for medicine, but research in general, is a strategy that God uses to reveal his design, the things that he created, and his desire for us in our human existence. So with that, I want to remind everybody, research in medicine is my field, but this is not strictly only applying to research in medicine, but all areas of research. I really believe that research allows us to understand God better, and understanding his creation, it takes us back to God himself. So let me tell you a little bit about research. Opposed to what people think, research is a little different to what we often anticipate. But before I do this, I want to ask people a question that I don't expect people to answer right away, but kind of like reaching within. How do you feel when you think about research in medicine? In these times of COVID, and this time when most of the research has been publicly exposed and has been scrutinized and questioned and all of this, I've asked this question to several people, and often the answer is they feel fear, or they feel anxiety, or they have doubts. So just live your feelings right there. I want you to be very well aware of how you feel. And the idea of this talk is that I want to instill hope in what research can be, or is, in my opinion, supposed to be. So opposed to what we think, research is not this straight line that takes us from the beginning of asking a question into a successful answer, but rather it's a bumpy, very, very intricate way that takes us from like a detour to a different detour, to a mishap, to a misdirection, a bumpy road. Pretty much like life. A lot happens in the middle, on the way. A lot happens in the process of asking questions and trying to answer them. Research is actually much more challenging than people think. Often things don't go as they were planned, and we need to remind ourselves to keep track of what the overall picture, or the direction where we're actually heading to. We often get answers that are different to what we anticipated, that are different to what we even imagined, and we need to commit to pursuing the truth with an unbiased approach, adjusting our mindset to fit the actual evidence instead of making the data or the evidence to fit our expectations. A lot of this or failed steps are actually pointing towards the actual truth. Often, our direction is much more important than our speed. There are a lot of people that are going nowhere, but they are going fast. And research in general is not a sprinting race, it's rather an endurance one. We need to commit to keep going despite the failures, despite the mishaps, despite the things that don't go the way we planned it. And we need to keep track of the big picture. What is actually happening? What is the overall progress that is happening in the middle? But the question is, how do we evaluate this progress? How do we evaluate our direction, or how do we determine the direction? Are we actually moving forward? Who determines our direction? Now, once Winston Churchill mentioned that success is the ability to go from one failure to another without losing our enthusiasm, and I truly agree with this statement. Success, opposed to the thought of that this is the mountaintop, the answered question, is actually the process of going from one mishap to the following, and with a determination to keep going until we actually genuinely reach the goal. The goal is the objective, or the goal is, or rather, success is not necessarily the goal. Success is part of the journey that takes us there. So let me tell you a little bit about my personal research experience. I told you I've been training as a medical doctor for a while, and the last couple of years I spent training as an immunologist, and I spent the last year and a half working in a lab on a specific syndrome that is called Schimke immunoosseous dystrophy, or SIOD for short. And I just want to give you a little context. This is a syndrome that produces dwarfism with immune deficiency, and kidney failure. So we were trying to understand how the syndrome comes to be. This is a type of disease that is inherited, so passed on from one generation to the other one. But it requires the 2 copies of one particular gene to be damaged or mutated, meaning both parents have to inherit a damaged copy of a specific gene to the son or daughter so that this person develops the syndrome. But our question was, how come the people that have both genes damaged have all the symptoms, but the parents that have one gene that is damaged don't have anything? So we went back to like trying to explain, and our hypothesis was this has to do with the protein. Most of the genes end up producing a specific protein and a specific amount of protein. So we thought, and this is our hypothesis, the parents have more protein than the kids, and that's why the kids have symptoms. I spent 1 year, at least a year, but it was a little over a year, trying to answer this one question, or trying to prove this hypothesis. But everything pointed towards the opposite. We couldn't prove that the kids had less protein. They actually showed that they had more, and this made no sense. All the evidence pointed to the opposite. So what then? What do we do? How do we keep going? Then we just adjust and we push forward. But we need to know that adjusting takes an effort. What does that really mean? Adjusting means that we need to keep learning. We need to commit our career, our life, our desire to becoming lifelong learners, allowing the evidence to actually inform our decision making, allowing the evidence to inspire our pursuit of truth, trying to change the paradigms of what we think and adjusting this into the true pursuit of truth, and not clinging to a mistake no matter how long we've been making it, right? Now, learning is the key. There was an American philosopher called Eric Hoffer that mentioned once that in times of change, and this may be one of the biggest times of change, things are changing so fast. Learners inherit the earth, while the learned find themselves beautifully equipped to deal with a world that no longer exists. As long as we're learning, we are actually adjusting to the world. And by adjusting to the world, I mean we are able to understand what happens and trying to keep track of the progress that we're making. And once we fail, quote unquote fail, and we decide to keep going and start again and press on, we're actually starting from the experience, from what we've learned from that journey. It is never from scratch. So we're not starting over, we're starting from that first step. In my case, now we understood not what we thought it would be, but now we know what is not. It's not about the amount of protein. We don't yet know what it is, but we know what is not. And that is good. Simon Sinek mentioned excitement comes from achievement. It is exciting to actually get to the mountaintop, to the actual sparkly golden success. But fulfillment, that is a more enduring, lasting feeling, comes from the journey that brought us where we are. The journey is actually the middle. This portion of the twists and turns, the bumpy road, the detours, this is what I've called the in-between. The in-between is the journey, the process, the period where everything is unfinished, is uncomfortable, there are a lot of questions yet and not that many answers, but this process is where growth happens. This is where we need to commit to press on and keep moving forward without shrinking back into what was comfortable, what we knew, or trying to fast forward into the success. We need to embrace the process of growth. And we need to embrace it by setting a goal that is so big that we can only achieve it until we become that person that can. Research is not just what we do. Research is kind of who we are. We are researchers. And in this process of growing, we need to kind of like dance between this fine balance between making things happen and allowing things to happen. But becoming and growing into this person that can achieve that success requires that we actually allow ourselves to partner with God. Because achieving that success is much more than serendipity. It requires an intentionality that has come from both ends. It comes from God's end because he's inviting us to partner with him. And it has to be intentional on our end because we need to accept his invitation to partner with him. God is the ultimate source of everything. He's the ultimate source of creativity, of inspiration, of design, of the actual answers and the actual questions. He is the source. He's the author of creation. He is the creator. So breakthrough, I genuinely believe, can only come from him. The breakthrough, that the kind of like groundbreaking discoveries can only come from him. He is the source. There are two verses in the Bible that are so encouraging to me, one in Mark and the other one in Proverbs. It says, "For nothing is hidden except to be made manifest, nor is anything secret except to come to light." And Proverbs says, "It is God's privilege to conceal things and the king's privilege to discover them." God created things in a specific way, and somehow he hid them in plain sight. But it is our journey and it's our privilege to be able to partner with him so we can discover the things that he created and understand how it works, how it looks, how it can be modified, how it can be used to help. Now, often God puts victory within our reach, but not always in our hands. And I genuinely believe that this is part of his design because he's more interested in who we are or who we are becoming than the very thing that we're capable of doing. But if we partner with God, we actually close that gap into where we are and where victory or breakthrough or success is. I really believe that God is looking for people that are willing to accept his invitation to partner with him so that he can do the impossible. We often settle for things that are within our reach, within our capacity, and we basically disregard the possibility of partnering with the God of creation that can do everything, that actually knows everything, so that we can get his revelation for that breakthrough. And we need to make sure that we make choices that reveal that reveal our faith, our hope, and not only our fear or our acceptance of reality. Now, God in Isaiah, he mentioned that when the time is right, he will make things happen. I believe the time is right when we have learned, when we have grown, when we've become the person that can actually achieve our destiny, right? And that process needs to be intentional. So we need to make sure that not only we're praying for what we're aiming to achieve, but we're also preparing. And that means that we need to be preparing academically, we need to be preparing technically, we need to learn skills, but we also need to be preparing spiritually, to be able to hear from God, to be able to understand his revelation. Often we think that God is much more distant and a lot more complex, but God approaches us in a simple way, and we need to prepare ourselves to be able to understand that revelation. So there are two take-home thoughts that I want to leave. We need to make sure that we're not downgrading our dream or our goal to match the reality or the fact or our capacity, but rather upgrading the faith and the determination to partner with God so that we can actually match and become a person that can reach our destiny. But the ability or the fact that determines whether or not or how God will use us is not only the credentials that we have, where we went to school or who we know or how skilled or experienced we are, but rather the availability. How willing are we to partner with God? I genuinely believe that research is a tool that God can use to reveal more of himself and to help us transform this world into a better, much better version of this, closer to what he had in mind. So I hope this is encouraging, and the fear and the doubt and the anxiety that research and medicine may be eliciting in you in these times of COVID and pandemic can be redeemed by the thought that God himself is intentionally inviting us to participate in research so that we can understand and get from him more revelation. I'll leave you with one of my favorite quotes in the world. It says, "Somewhere, something incredible is waiting to be known." Thank you for your attention and thank you for having me here.
Thank you so much, Juanita. That was amazing. I love your passion for medicine and research. I'm gonna have everybody, why don't we all turn on our cameras for a quick discussion? Juanita is actually joining us from Colombia in South America. We have a very international panel today. So question, Juanita, how do you rely on, and then we'll open up questions from other people as well, but how do you rely on or interact with God in your research? And then I have a follow-up, which is if someone is like unsure of what to trust, so they don't know like mask or no mask, vaccine or no vaccine, how can they ask God? How can God partner with them in understanding what his will is in that?
Those are great questions. For the first one, every time studying medicine requires a lot of intentional studying time. So the way I approach it, I generally personally enjoy studying a lot, but part of what makes it more interesting is the fact that every time I start studying something, I actually ask God to help me understand, to help reveal what he created so that I can understand the matter and understand him. There's a quote that says this, that beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. So if you're looking for beauty, you'll find it. If you're looking for God, you'll find him. He's all over. So finding his fingerprints in creation, in science, in the evidence of what he created, the details of, in particular, immunology is mind-blowing. I get so much joy from studying, understanding the things that go wrong, and that's how it manifests in a syndrome. Or so that inspires me. And I have like a little list of questions that I sometimes just get randomly when I'm studying, try to keep track, and it's like, I cannot answer this, but I want to keep track of those questions because eventually I pray and I hope that I can get to answer those questions, and that will reveal more of God to myself, but also in favor of others. Now, when it comes to the pandemic, this is it's not a simple question, right? Because there are two kind of like extreme positions. One that says God will protect me and I have to do nothing, and the other one that says God can protect me and he's using science to do it, right? I am more inclined to think that God has given us strategies and skills that can actually be used for our benefit. Actually, the vaccines have been, me as an immunologist, I'm all in for vaccines because they have been pretty much the one strategy or one intervention that has genuinely changed the course of like natural disease in the history. We are no longer dying of things that we were dying from or of in the past because now we have vaccines that make us immune for those, right? So I am more inclined to thinking that God is using science and research in science and the effort of the many people, whether they believe in him or not. He's outside of that equation, right? But he's still God. He's still sovereign. So the pandemic did not catch God by surprise, right? But God is genuinely interested in our well-being. So making sure that we are not dismissing the not like overly spiritual strategies just because it's not coming from our pastor or from our priest or whatever, I don't think it's wise. I think we need to allow ourselves to find God in the middle of what is given to us, that is science and evidence. And in that, I genuinely believe that if we look for God there, we'll find him. And that will comfort us and give us a lot of peace, because if we understand that God uses a strategy that seems to be a little ordinary and very secular, if he can use, you remember there's a story in the Bible that he used a donkey to give a message? If he can use a donkey, he can use scientists to bless the world. So I genuinely believe we can find God in the middle of the pandemic, in the middle of the science per se, in the middle of the evidence. God's fingerprints are all over.
That's incredible. Do we have any comments or questions from the rest of the panel?
I really enjoyed your presentation, and I'm so amazed that you went into immunology, which is probably one of the most complex areas in medicine. And just wondering, do you have opportunities for other people to see this is God's creation? It couldn't have happened on its own.
I've had the opportunity to train other people, and I'm always encouraging people to seek God in the middle of that. So I agree with you. Immunology is probably one of the most complex like systems, and that is actually the reason why I was so intrigued and so passionate about it, because in the scope of what is known in immunology, there are a lot of more things that are not yet known, and opposed to some other specialties that have had a lot more research and a lot of more like breakthroughs. Immunology is fascinating, and there have been amazing discoveries and progress, but there are a lot of things that we still don't know, and that to me is the most encouraging part. Is like I get to learn new things and I get to teach them, and that is a privilege. I just love it because it's not all written and it's not all finished. We're still writing history, and that is what I encourage people that I train with, and I have fellows under my care and residents, and it's like, look for God, you'll see him there. So yeah, we find him.
Well, thank you so much, Juanita. You're so genuine and authentic, and I think your passion just is so beautiful. I'm so glad you're healing people at scale with your knowledge and your research and your practice. So